I used to believe that family was everything, that they were the people who would catch you when you fell, no matter what. But I learned the hard way that sometimes the ones who are supposed to love you the most are the very ones who let you fall. I'll never forget the cold, sterile air of that hospital room, the blinding fluorescent lights, and the hushed voices I wasn't supposed to hear. They thought I was unconscious, that my eyes were closed and my ears were deaf, but I heard every word, the words that changed my life forever, the words that told me my own parents were ready to let me die for money. Before I dive into my story, I'd really appreciate it if you could let me know where you're watching from in the comments, and if you'd consider subscribing to my channel. It would mean the world to me and help me keep sharing more stories like this. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Chloe Maxwell, and my story, like so many others, begins not with a bang, but with a quiet, persistent ache for as long as I can remember. I have been the quiet one, the observer, while my brother, Aiden, was busy dazzling our parents with his ambition and charisma. I found my solace in the silent language of clay. My hands, once clumsy, learned to speak, molding form and function from a simple lump of earth in my tiny Brooklyn apartment. The scent of fresh clay and the quiet hum of the kiln were my only companions. My parents back in Florida, obsessed with the shiny facade of success, saw my work as nothing more than a childish hobby, an expensive distraction from a real career. They couldn't comprehend a life that wasn't measured in dollars and stock options. I had been a ghost in my own home, a silent witness to a life I never wanted to be a part of. The family dinners were a performance, not a gathering. I'd sit at the mahogany table, meticulously set with porcelain and silver, and listen to my father talk about his latest property deals and my mother plan elaborate charity galas, all while I just wanted to retreat to my small, quiet corner of the world and lose myself in the feel of the clay under my hands. The atmosphere was a suffocating blend of pretense and cold ambition. Aiden, 2 years my junior, was their golden child, a perfect reflection of their values. He was everything I wasn't confident, outgoing, and effortlessly charming. He was a natural salesman, a chip off the old block, and he was on a fast track to take over my father's real estate business. I was the art major who chose to throw pots instead of money. I never understood their obsession with appearances, the way they constantly polished our family image for the sake of their Florida social circle. The house was always immaculate, the smiles were always perfect, and behind closed doors, the conversation always revolved around wealth and status. It was a suffocating world, and I had built a life 1,000 miles away to escape it. The news of my grandmother's passing hit me like a physical blow. She was the one person who saw me, truly saw me. She had a quiet elegance and a fierce, unspoken strength that I always admired. She never questioned my passion for pottery. Instead, she'd sit for hours in my small Brooklyn studio, simply watching me work, her eyes reflecting a deep, knowing understanding. "Chloe, my dear," she once said, her voice soft as velvet. "People will forget the number in your bank account, but they will never forget the beauty you create with your own two hands." Those words were the foundation upon which I built my entire life. They were my secret inheritance long before I knew about the physical one. I rushed back to Florida, the humid air thick with unspoken grief and the even heavier weight of my family's presence. The house was filled with the low murmurs of condolence, the clinking of glasses, and the unsettling smiles of people who had no idea what we were really like. I kept my distance, clinging to the shadows of the living room, a ghost in my own family's house. I saw a distant cousin discreetly ask my mother about the family's estate, and a close friend of my father's make a casual, offhand comment about how sad it was to see such a valuable property change hands. The air was thick with it, an unspoken greed that was far more potent than any genuine sorrow. I knew this wasn't a time for shared grief. It was a time for posturing and a quiet, hungry calculation of what was left behind. The reading of the will was a tense affair. My parents, sitting on plush leather chairs, their faces a carefully constructed mask of sorrow, seemed to be holding their breath. Aiden sat beside them, his posture a mirror of my father's, a perfect picture of a dutiful son waiting for his reward. I sat across from them, my hands clasped tightly in my lap, feeling the familiar sense of being on the outside looking in. The lawyer droned on, listing assets and accounts, and my parents' eyes lit up with every number. But their expressions soured when he got to my part. My grandmother had left them a small sum of cash in the family home. To me, she left a small wooden chest, old and worn, filled with her own pottery tools. My mother's polite smile faltered. My father's jaw tightened. After the lawyer left, the real conversation began. My parents tried to hide their anger, but it was a flimsy veil. My mother's voice was laced with poison as she commented on the useless trinkets my grandmother had left me. "What on earth are you going to do with those? Chloe, they're hardly worth anything. Your grandmother must have been losing her mind." My father, always the more direct of the two, sighed heavily. "She should have left that money to Aiden," he said, his voice a low growl. "He knows what to do with it. This is a waste." The words, though expected, still stung. I felt the familiar burn of tears, but I refused to let them fall. I would not give them the satisfaction. I just clutched the wooden chest to my chest, its weight of physical comfort against the emptiness in my heart. Later, at the reception, I tried to find a quiet corner, but my mother followed. "Chloe, darling, don't you think it's a shame?" she asked, her voice syrupy sweet. "Grandmother knew you were struggling. She should have left you a real inheritance, something to get you on your feet." I saw right through her. It wasn't about me. It was about what she and my father believed they were owed. I simply nodded and walked away. A silent retreat. But later, at the end of the night, as they were packing up to leave, I overheard my mother talking to my father. "I can't believe she would do this. She should have left it to Aiden. He's the one who's actually going to do something with his life." And the worst part was, my father agreed. It was a final, painful confirmation of everything I had always known. Back in Brooklyn, I poured my grief and frustration into my work. The loss of my grandmother and the betrayal of my parents fueled a new kind of creative energy. I started a new project, a series of vases inspired by the ocean, the way the waves crash against the shore, strong and resilient, using the tools my grandmother had left me. I felt a connection to her I had never felt before. The old tools, with their worn handles and chipped edges, felt like an extension of her hands, guiding mine. I posted a short video of me working on one of the pieces on social media, not expecting much. The next morning, I woke up to a flood of notifications. My video had gone viral. Comments and shares poured in, and my inbox was filled with inquiries from art galleries and collectors. It was an overwhelming, surreal experience. My useless trinkets were not so useless after all. The success was intoxicating. It was everything I had worked for. And it was all thanks to my own two hands and the quiet wisdom of my grandmother. I was finally on my way to building a name for myself. The irony wasn't lost on me. As my life blossomed, my parents became more and more agitated. My mother would call and ask me to send her pictures of my work, her voice full of a saccharine interest that was anything but genuine. She kept dropping hints about a partnership, about managing my business. "Chloe, darling, people who are famous need professional help," she said in one conversation, her voice dripping with fake concern. "Your father and I have so much experience. We could help you with contracts and promotions. We could be a great team." I knew what she was really after. A piece of my success. My phone. Once a quiet device used for a few calls and social media scrolls became a constant source of pings and notifications. My inbox, previously a digital desert, was now a bustling marketplace. Gallery owners from across the country reached out, offering exhibition spaces and partnerships. One of the most prestigious art galleries in Soho, a place I had only ever dreamed of visiting, proposed a solo show, The Speaking Hands of Chloe Maxwell. One magazine headline read, "A stark, beautiful contrast to my family's dismissal of my work." The recognition was not just about the art. It was an acknowledgement of me. of the quiet girl who had spent a lifetime in the shadows. Aiden, my brother, the golden child, also reappeared with a newfound affection. He would send me text messages gushing about my talent and how he had always believed in me. The hypocrisy was staggering. I recalled every dismissive glance, every casual joke about my messy hobby. His sudden admiration felt not like a brotherly bond, but like a business transaction. Another calculation to see how he could benefit from my rising star. I kept my distance, politely but firmly turning down their offers to help, to visit, to reconnect. My new life was mine alone, built with my own two hands, and I would not allow them to contaminate it. One afternoon, a couple weeks after the video went viral, I was driving home, a trunk full of clay and supplies. I was at a green light, just a few blocks from my apartment, when a delivery truck ran the red light and slammed into my car. The world became a kaleidoscope of shattering glass and twisted metal, a symphony of screeching tires and a thudding impact that reverberated through my bones. Everything went black. I woke up in a hospital bed, the air thick with the antiseptic smell of disinfectant. My head throbbed, my body ached, and I tried to speak, but nothing came out. A wave of cold panic washed over me, squeezing my chest in a vice-like grip. I couldn't scream. I couldn't even whimper. It was a terrifying, suffocating silence. A kind-faced nurse, seeing the distress in my eyes, gently explained that I had suffered a serious concussion and some injuries to my larynx, but my voice would return in time. I was in a daze, the details of the crash a blurry mess of fleeting images. Then, I heard a familiar voice from the hallway. My mother. She was talking to my father. They thought I was unconscious, a lifeless puppet with no ears to hear their wicked whispers. I heard her say, "The doctor said her condition is critical. If she doesn't make it, we can finally get our hands on that inheritance." My father's voice was a low hum. "And what about her pottery?" "The article said her pieces were worth a fortune. We could sell them and recoup some of our losses." A cold, suffocating dread settled over me. This wasn't a scene from a movie. This was my life. The people who had brought me into this world, who were supposed to be my protectors, were hoping for my death. The realization was a blow more profound than any physical injury. They were not my family. They were vultures circling a carcass. The love they had shown was a carefully crafted lie, a mask they wore until they thought no one was looking. I pretended to be unconscious, my mind racing, a new resolve hardening inside me. I had to do something they would never see coming. The next few days were a blur of visitors and physical therapy. My parents and Aiden came to visit every day, their faces a grotesque mask of concern. They would hold my hand, tell me they loved me, and in the same breath, ask pointed questions about my affairs. My father, ever the businessman, asked about my will, my bank accounts, and my recent art sales. His greed was so blatant it was almost laughable. One afternoon, my mother spoke to my father in hushed tones. "Have you called a lawyer? We need to get things in order before it's too late." They brought a lawyer with them one day, a slick, smarmy man in an expensive suit, a perfect accomplice to their scheme. My mother, with a practiced tear in her eye, spoke to him in a hushed voice, explaining that I was incapable of making my own decisions. The lawyer presented me with a stack of papers, a power of attorney, granting them full control over my finances and medical decisions. They slid a pen into my hand, my father giving me a gentle, reassuring nod. They thought they had me. They saw a weak, vulnerable girl, a helpless little bird they could pluck clean. But they didn't know that my silence had given me strength. I took the pen, my hand trembling slightly, and wrote one sentence on the top page. My handwriting small but firm. I heard everything. "You came here for the money, not for me." My mother's face went white. My father's jaw dropped. The lawyer's smug expression melted into a horrified blankness. Their masks had finally come off, revealing the ugly, greedy faces underneath. My mother started to cry, a performative, dramatic sob that lacked any real emotion. My father yelled, accusing me of being ungrateful. How could you do this to us after everything we've sacrificed for you? I just looked at them, my eyes cold and empty, and then I pointed at Aiden, who stood silently in the corner, his face ashen, the golden child, their favorite, their willing accomplice, the one they loved more. He, too, was a part of this grotesque betrayal. The next day, I had my own lawyer come to the hospital, a trusted friend of my grandmother. I told him everything. My voice was still weak, but my resolve was stronger than ever. I sold everything, my apartment, my kiln, my entire inventory of finished pottery, even the crashed car. The funds were transferred into a new, private account. A significant portion of the money I donated to a local art therapy program for children, a tribute to my grandmother's memory and a way to ensure her legacy of kindness continued. I instructed my lawyer to send my family a single, final letter. It was my definitive goodbye. In it, I simply stated that I had severed all ties and that they were not to contact me again. I didn't need to see the looks on their faces when they received it. The thought of their shock, their anger, their bitter disappointment was a sweet and powerful victory. I was discharged from the hospital, but instead of returning to Brooklyn, I went somewhere new. I bought a small plot of land in a secluded rural area in California, far from the city noise and the toxic people who had once called themselves my family. It was a blank canvas, and I was ready to start over. I built a new studio, installed a new kiln, and started working with a quiet, renewed sense of purpose. I built a small wooden house with a porch that overlooked a field of wildflowers. I wasn't just building a new life, I was building a new family. My neighbors, a retired couple, were kind and welcoming. My new friends were a group of fellow artists who understood my quiet solitude. I didn't need to explain myself to anyone. I didn't need to justify my actions or seek their approval. My freedom was my revenge. I didn't get to see the looks on their faces when they received the letter, when they realized I had vanished and there was nothing left for them to take, but I didn't need to. The peace I felt in my new home was more than enough. It was a silence filled with the gentle hum of my kiln, the chirping of crickets at night, and the quiet satisfaction of a life reclaimed. I had lost a family, but I had gained a soul. And I knew then that some things, like the value of a single piece of pottery or the worth of a life, are not measured in dollars, but in the love and loyalty that make us whole.